In a world where his genius is overlooked and his voice silenced, a young boy named Delhi enters an unexpected competition with the grand prize being a visit to a renowned technology company. Despite facing relentless prejudice, Delhi achieves incredible success, winning the 3-stage-long competition. When he arrives at the company to claim his reward, unexpected malfunctions occur, and Delhi is determined to take full responsibility. Even though the engineers oppose him when they fail to solve the problem, Delhi seizes the chance to prove himself. Will his intelligence be enough to save the day and change his life forever? If you liked the video and have subscribed to my channel, let's move on to our story. Enjoy watching. Delhi was a ghost in the halls of Sterling Middle School. He moved through the teeming currents of students with an invisible shield of silent detachment, a skill honed by years of practice. His silence, however, was not born of shyness. It was a calculated defense mechanism against the relentless, low-humming mockery that followed him. It was in the hushed giggles when he raised his hand, in the sidelong glances when he walked past, and in the casual cutting jokes about his Aphrodite, or how he was a late-stage upgrade to the human race. They were the cruel, creative insults of teenagers who found a target in anyone who didn't fit, and Delhi, with his deep-set eyes, his neatly coiled hair and his quiet brilliance, was an easy mark. His teachers saw his intelligence in the neat, precise answers on his tests, but they often mistook his reticence for disinterest. He was a puzzle they never bothered to solve, just a number on a grade sheet. His only true ally was Kofi, a loud, loyal kid with a booming laugh that could fill a room and an unapologetic admiration for Delhi's mind. They sat together at lunch, discussing everything from the physics of black holes to the elegant simplicity of Python loops, topics that were far removed from the social hierarchy of middle school. The announcement came on a Tuesday morning, crackling over the loudspeaker and making the usual din of the cafeteria pause. "Attention all students," boomed Mr. Harrison, the school's tech and robotics teacher, his voice full of an almost palpable excitement. "This year, Sterling Middle is proud to announce our first ever Invent and Produce competition. The grand prize is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, a guided tour of the Innovate campus, the leading technology company in the country. You'll get to meet their engineers, see their labs, and get a first-hand look at the future of technology." The cafeteria erupted. Innovate was the stuff of legends in their small town. The company's campus was a futuristic marvel on the edge of the city, a place of sleek glass and gleaming chrome, a beacon of progress and innovation. For the students of Sterling, it was a place that felt more like a sci-fi movie than a real-life company. Delhi's heart fluttered for a moment, a rare spark of uncontained excitement. He had followed Innovate's every new patent and product launch with a feverish intensity, sketching out his own improvements in the margins of his notebooks. The thought of walking through those halls, seeing the real-world application of the principles he loved, was exhilarating. But the spark was quickly extinguished by a familiar, heavy weight. A snicker from a few tables over, followed by a theatrical cough from Marcus, the self-proclaimed king of the school's social scene. "Guess our brainiac has a chance," Marcus stage whispered to his friends, a smirk plastered on his face. "Too bad the real prize is just a company tour and not a new face." His friends snickered. Delhi's head dropped, his gaze fixed on his lunch tray. He was a ghost again. "I'm not doing it," Delhi said to Kofi later that day as they walked home. He kicked a loose pebble on the sidewalk. "What? Are you crazy?" Kofi exclaimed, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Delhi, this is your chance. This is literally what you were born to do. You think in code and logic. You've been building circuit boards out of literal trash for the past 3 years. You're the best at this, Delhi. The best. Don't let them get to you." "It's not them," Delhi lied even to himself. It's a waste of time. I know I can do it, but what if I fail? Then the whole school will have another reason to laugh at me. And what if you succeed?" Kofi retorted. "Then they'll just have to deal with it. They'll have to see what you really are." The next morning, Delhi found his name on the sign-up sheet, written in Kofi's unmistakable scrawl. He sighed, a half-hearted gesture of annoyance, but a small smile played on his lips. The spark had reignited, and this time he was ready to let it burn. The first round was announced a week later. The challenge was simple on the surface, but devilishly complex in its execution. You have been given a shoebox, a small motor, 2 batteries, a spool of wire, and an assortment of scrap materials. Your task is to design and build a device that can sort at least 3 different objects by size in under 60 seconds. The classroom, a hub of activity, was filled with a nervous energy. Students clustered in groups, their faces a mixture of confusion and determination. Many immediately went for the most obvious solutions, creating ramps, levers, and simple chutes. Marcus and his friends, a clique of athletic but academically challenged boys, tried to brute force a solution, haphazardly taping together cardboard and using flimsy wires that frayed and snapped. Their laughter, usually so confident, was now tinged with frustration. Deli, however, sat in a corner, far from the frantic energy. He didn't immediately touch the materials. He simply stared at them, his eyes unblinking, his mind a silent storm of calculations and possibilities. He sketched out a few diagrams on a loose sheet of paper, his hand moving with the elegant precision of an architect. When he finally began to work, his movements were deliberate and economical. He wasn't building a simple chute, he was building a system. He carefully cut 2 long narrow strips of cardboard from the shoebox, then bent them into a shallow V shape, creating a small trough. He attached the motor to one end, positioning it to create a subtle vibration. He then ran a thin wire, a single filament stripped from the spool, and looped it around the inside of the trough, creating a series of tiny, almost imperceptible speed bumps. He wasn't sorting by size in the traditional sense. He was using the vibration to move the objects forward, with the larger objects being slowed down by the speed bumps, while the smaller ones would zip past them. It was a brilliant application of friction and kinetic energy, a solution that no one else in the room had even considered. When Mr. Harrison called time, the students presented their makeshift contraptions. Most barely worked, sorting maybe 1 or 2 objects, if any. The room was a mess of crumpled cardboard and tangled wires. When it was Deli's turn, he walked to the front of the class, his device in his hands. It was simple, almost elegant in its design. The teacher, intrigued, placed a few small, medium, and large paper clips at the top of the trough. Deli flicked a switch and the motor hummed to life. The whole contraption vibrated and the paper clips began to move. The large ones slowed down and fell into one section, the medium ones into another, and the small ones into a third. In just 35 seconds, every single object was sorted perfectly. The room was silent. A few students gaped, their mouths agape. Marcus's face, usually so smug, was now pale with a mixture of shock and anger. "It must be a fluke," he muttered under his breath, loud enough for Deli to hear. "There's no way he could have done that. Probably cheated." "That is enough, Marcus," Mr. Harrison said, his voice firm. He picked up Deli's device, examining it with a newfound respect. "There is no cheating here. This is a brilliant piece of engineering. Deli, can you explain your design to the class?" Deli, standing a little straighter than usual, explained the concept of using friction to differentiate the object's movement. He spoke with the quiet confidence of a master craftsman explaining his work. For the first time, his words commanded the room's attention, not as a target of ridicule, but as a source of genuine genius. The day ended with a triumphant announcement. The first round of the Invent and Produce competition had an undisputed winner. "Congratulations to Deli," Mr. Harrison announced, a smile on his face. His design was not only functional but truly innovative. He will be moving on to the next round. The words hung in the air, met with a smattering of applause from a few scattered students and a deep, resentful silence from the rest. For Deli, it was a moment of bittersweet victory. He had succeeded, but in doing so, he had stepped out of the shadows and into the harsh glare of the spotlight. The mocking whispers would no longer be hushed. They would be a full-throated chorus. And the competition, he knew, had just begun. The whispers had stopped. In their place was a more biting, palpable tension. Deli's victory in the first round of the Invent and Produce competition had not earned him respect, but a new, more venomous form of contempt. The quiet mockery had morphed into open resentment. Marcus, in particular, was seething. He now followed Deli through the halls with a predatory glare, a silent promise of retribution in his eyes. "You're not a ghost anymore, man," Kofi said, clapping Deli on the shoulder as they sat down in the tech classroom. "You're a legend. The whole school is talking about it." Deli just shrugged, his gaze fixed on the workbench. "They're not talking about my device, Kofi. They're talking about how I must have cheated. How I got lucky." His words proved prophetic. As the students gathered, Marcus sauntered over, his friends in tow. Well, 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 he sneered, leaning against Deli's table. Look what we have here. Guess you can't build your way out of a challenge that requires an actual brain, huh? A little bird told me you're just good at building things with your hands. Too bad the next challenge is about communication, not just dumb luck. Deli didn't respond. He simply looked up at Marcus, his dark eyes steady. It was a silent challenge, a refusal to engage. Marcus, fueled by the lack of reaction, grew bolder. He took a small paper clip from Deli's desk and flicked it, a sharp, metallic sound breaking the quiet. Don't get too comfortable, genius. This is still my territory, he said before walking back to his group. Deli just pushed the paper clip to the side and exhaled slowly. The air around him was now thicker with antagonism than it had ever been. Mr. Harrison walked to the front of the room, a large wooden box in his arms. He set it down with a thud. All right, everyone, he announced, his voice cutting through the classroom's low hum. Welcome to the second round. The challenge is as follows. You have 90 minutes to design and build a device that can transmit a unique, verifiable message from this end of the gym to the other. The only materials you are allowed to use are what I have placed in this box. A small battery, an assortment of mirrors, a low-powered laser pointer, a single spool of thread, and a pack of matches. The room buzzed with a mix of excitement and confusion. Many students immediately began to strategize, some suggesting elaborate mirror setups to bounce the laser light around obstacles, while others pondered how to use the thread or matches to create a sound or smoke signal. Marcus and his group, however, scoffed. Seriously? What is this, a spy movie? Marcus said to his friends. This is easy. We'll just build a huge mirror rig and flash a message. No big deal. Deli, as before, remained still, his mind racing. He knew the limitations of the materials. Bouncing a laser beam across a large gym with small handheld mirrors would be a near impossible task. The slightest tremor of a hand would cause the beam to miss its target entirely. Relying on sound with the flimsy thread or the limited smoke from the matches was equally unreliable. He had to think of a different way. He had to find a way to transmit the message not through brute force, but through an elegant, self-contained system. He began by carefully examining the laser pointer. It was cheap, with a wobbly button that made a consistent beam impossible. He then took out the small, smooth mirrors. They were no bigger than a quarter. He considered his options, sketching out a few ideas. He had an idea. He could use a property of light that no one in the room, save perhaps Mr. Harrison, would have considered: light's ability to be modulated. He could encode a message not in the pattern of the flashes but in the subtle vibrations of the light itself. He took a single thin strand from the spool of thread and stretched it taut between two small pieces of cardboard from the wooden box, like a makeshift guitar string. He then took one of the matches, carefully scraping the head to get a small amount of powder, which he mixed with a drop of water from his water bottle to create a paste. He then placed this paste on the end of a very small piece of cardboard, creating a tiny, makeshift megaphone. Next, he carefully attached the laser pointer to the megaphone-like device, positioning the beam to hit the thread. His plan was to use the laser's vibration, amplified by the megaphone-like device, to transmit the message. His hands were a blur of motion, precise and quick. He was in his element, the outside world fading away until it was just him and the problem. The taunts and glares were a distant memory. All that mattered was the elegant logic of the solution. When time was called, a nervous energy filled the gym. Groups of students lined up, their devices ranging from massive, clumsy mirror contraptions to small, makeshift smoke signal launchers. Most failed. Marcus's group, for all their bravado, managed to get a few flashes across, but the message was incoherent, lost in the chaotic bouncing of the beam. Mr. Harrison, his face a mask of polite disappointment, recorded their scores. Then it was Deli's turn. He walked to the center of the gym, a small cardboard device no bigger than his hand cradled carefully in his palm. He walked to the starting line, placing his device on the floor. He spoke the message he wanted to transmit into the megaphone, his voice a low hum. On the other end of the gym, Mr. Harrison held a small handheld light sensor. The device hummed faintly, and the sensor beeped in response, displaying a short, encoded message on its screen. Deli's device had transmitted a perfect, coherent message. The room was silent, a deeper silence than before. Not just from shock but from a dawning realization. This wasn't a fluke. This was pure, unadulterated genius. Mr. Harrison stared at the message on the sensor, then back at Deli's small device, his expression one of a growing, hesitant awe. "Deli," Mr. Harrison said, his voice quiet. "How did you do that?" Deli explained his concept of light modulation, how the vibrations of his voice caused subtle shifts in the laser beam, and how the sensor on the other end was able to pick up on those shifts and translate them back into a coherent message. He spoke with a quiet confidence that was entirely new. The words were simple, but the concepts were anything but. Marcus, standing in the back, his face a mask of disbelief and rage, let out a frustrated shout. "This is a joke. He's just making stuff up. It's not fair. He must have cheated again." "Marcus, please," Mr. Harrison said, his voice firm, a note of finality in it. "This is not cheating. This is a brilliant application of physics. He didn't just build a device. He understood the underlying principles to a degree that no one else in this room has. This device, Deli's device, is the winner of this round." The announcement was met with a stunned silence. Deli stood in the middle of the gym, his head held a little higher, the weight of his success now a part of him. He was no longer a ghost. He was a force to be reckoned with. The final round loomed, and with it, the undeniable truth that one of them, the brilliant, underestimated black student, was a step closer to winning. The final round of the Invent and Produce competition was not a quiet affair in a stuffy classroom. Mr. Harrison had scheduled it for Friday afternoon, in the school's crowded auditorium, transforming it into a public spectacle. The entire student body and most of the faculty were in attendance, a sea of expectant faces in the dim light. The tension was a living thing, a coiled serpent in the air. For the first time, Deli felt the full, unfiltered weight of the school's gaze. It wasn't just a few snickers now, it was an entire auditorium waiting to see if he was truly a genius or just a fluke. Kofi stood by his side, a silent, comforting presence. "Just focus on the problem, men," he whispered. "They're just noise." Marcus, on the other side of the stage, was a picture of arrogant confidence, a mask of bravado over a simmering fury. He had spent the entire week cornering students, spreading rumors about how Deli had hacked the previous challenges. His friends were a loyal, jeering chorus behind him, their laughs loud and forced. Marcus wasn't just trying to win the competition. He was trying to reclaim his social territory. Mr. Harrison strode onto the stage, a microphone in his hand. "Welcome everyone to the final round of the Invent and Produce competition," he announced. The audience quieted. This final challenge is the most difficult one yet. It combines engineering, logic, and problem-solving under pressure. The scenario is this: a small, valuable item has fallen into a hard-to-reach, unstable cavern. Your task is to design and build a robotic device that can retrieve the item and safely return it to the start line. You have 90 minutes. May the best inventor win. He then revealed the challenge setup. A large, enclosed box on the stage floor, its interior filled with a chaotic terrain of foam rocks and uneven cardboard slopes. A small, gleaming metal key lay at the very bottom, in a narrow, rocky crevice. Beside the box, on each workbench were the allotted materials: a small battery, a motor, a roll of duct tape, several thin, flexible plastic rods, some rubber bands, and an old pair of safety scissors. Marcus and his team immediately went to work, their approach a predictable display of brute force. They started taping the plastic rods together, trying to create a long, rigid arm that could simply reach into the cavern. They focused on power, connecting the motor to the arm with a series of makeshift gears and pulleys, intending to force the arm into position. Their laughter returned, now full of a renewed confidence. "Easy money," Marcus said to his friends, loud enough for Deli to hear. "We'll just grab the key and be done with it. No need for any of that weird physics stuff." Deli, as usual, sat quietly for a few moments, observing the terrain and the materials. His mind was a whirlwind of calculations, a silent dance of possibilities. The challenge wasn't about reach, he realized. It was about precision and control. The rigid arm Marcus was building would be too clumsy, too heavy. It would likely knock over the foam rocks and bury the key, or worse, get stuck. The problem wasn't about power, it was about finesse. He began to work, his movements precise and deliberate. He took one of the flexible plastic rods and carefully split it lengthwise with the safety scissors, creating two thin, spring-like strips. He then used a single rubber band to connect the motor to a small, circular piece of cardboard, creating a low-speed, high-torque winch. His masterpiece, however, was his grappling hook. He took the remaining plastic rods and, with the clever use of a small knife, carved them into two hinged, claw-like arms. He attached them to the end of a long, thin rod made of two of the plastic strips taped together, then ran a thin string, a single thread from the previous challenge he had kept in his pocket, through the inside of the rod to the winch. His device, when he was finished, was an elegant, almost delicate machine. It was a remote-controlled, lightweight robotic arm that could extend, pivot, and, most importantly, grasp the key with a gentle, precise grip. It was a device that looked nothing like the hulking contraption Marcus was building. It looked, for lack of a better word, smart. When time was called, the entire auditorium held its breath. Marcus's team went first. They unveiled a long, clumsy contraption, a patchwork of plastic and duct tape. With a loud whir, they extended the arm toward the cavern. It was immediately clear their design was flawed. The arm, heavy and unwieldy, wobbled uncontrollably. It knocked over several foam rocks, triggering a small avalanche that buried the key. Marcus cursed under his breath, desperately trying to maneuver the arm, but it was useless. The crowd murmured in disappointment. Then it was Deli's turn. He walked to the center of the stage, his small, elegant device in his hands. He placed it on the starting line and picked up the controller he had also built. He looked out at the sea of faces, his heart pounding, but his hands were steady. He took a deep breath and with a soft hum, his device went to work. The arm extended, gliding smoothly into the cavern. Deli maneuvered it with a series of small, precise movements. He pivoted the arm around a foam rock, then carefully extended the grappling hook. The audience watched in rapt silence as the two hinged arms of the claw opened and closed, gently wrapping around the key. He then pulled the key back, slowly and carefully, until it was safely out of the cavern. He retracted the arm, placing the key at the start line. The whole process took just under 2 minutes. The auditorium erupted. It was a roar of genuine, thunderous applause, a sound Deli had never heard directed at him before. People were standing, cheering, their faces filled with a mixture of shock and admiration. For the first time, his genius wasn't just acknowledged, it was celebrated. The applause was so loud that Mr. Harrison had to wait for it to die down before he could speak. He walked over to Deli, a wide, genuine smile on his face. He held up the key for everyone to see. "We have a winner," he said, his voice brimming with pride. "This year's Invent and Produce champion is Deli. This is not just a win for him, it's a win for all of us. He showed us that brilliance isn't about making the most noise or being the most popular. It's about a quiet, unwavering commitment to an idea." Marcus, his face a mask of utter defeat and fury, stormed off the stage, his friends following close behind. His last muttered words were lost in the roar of the crowd, but Deli didn't need to hear them. The message was clear. Marcus was humiliated, and Deli's victory had come at a heavy cost. Later that day, after the crowds had dispersed and the cheers had faded, Deli sat in his room, the gleaming key from the competition in his palm. Kofi was there, his face shining with uncontained joy. "You did it, man. You actually did it." "Yeah," Deli said, a small, tired smile on his face. "I did it." The victory felt both sweet and heavy. He had proved his worth, but in doing so, he had invited a new level of scrutiny. He was no longer a ghost in the halls. He was a target. The teachers, previously so detached, now looked at him with a different kind of curiosity, a new, tentative respect. But the students who had mocked him, they had simply found a new reason to resent him. He was the winner. He was going to Innovate. The thought filled him with a quiet, triumphant thrill. He was going to a place where he wouldn't be judged by the color of his skin or the quietness of his demeanor, but by the brilliance of his mind. At least that's what he hoped. The chaos of his own small world was now behind him. The chaos of a bigger world he knew was just around the corner. The bus ride to Innovatech was a quiet, tense affair. The other students who had qualified for the tour, a handful of robotics club members and a few of Marcus's more academically inclined friends, whispered among themselves, their glances darting from the passing scenery to Deli's silent form. He sat alone, Kofi a protective half-circle away, his headphones on, the world outside his mind a dull, muted hum. The teasing had mostly stopped, replaced by a sullen, simmering resentment that felt even heavier than the open mockery. Deli, however, barely noticed. His heart was a drum against his ribs. He was going to Innovatech. The campus was a spectacle of futuristic design, a landscape of polished steel and seamless glass that reflected the bright morning sun. The main building, a sprawling, multifaceted structure, seemed to defy the laws of architecture, its curved walls and geometric angles fitting together in a complex, elegant puzzle. A sign read, Innovate, where tomorrow is built today. Delhi felt a familiar spark of excitement. This was his world. This was where his ideas belonged. Their tour guide, a young, energetic engineer named Chloe, met them at the entrance. She was a whirlwind of practiced smiles and corporate jargon, her voice a polished broadcast of enthusiasm. She led them through gleaming white halls, past laboratories where robotic arms whirred with purpose and glass-walled rooms where engineers worked on holographic displays. The air was cool and sterile, a testament to the company's precision. And this, Chloe said, gesturing to a massive humming server room, its walls lined with blinking lights and intricate wiring, is the heart of our operations. Every data packet, every computational process, every single piece of information that flows through our company, is routed through here. It's a marvel of engineering, a self-sustaining ecosystem of pure logic. She paused to let the words sink in, a proud smile on her face. Our infrastructure is the most robust and reliable in the world. Delhi didn't just see a room of computers. He saw the delicate balance of heat and power, the intricate pathways of data. He saw the elegant simplicity behind the overwhelming complexity. He noticed a faint, high-pitched whine that seemed to emanate from a large, cylindrical vent high on the wall, a sound that no one else seemed to hear over the low thrum of the servers. He mentally filed it away, an unusual anomaly in an otherwise perfect system. As they moved on, the tour took a turn toward the more mundane. Chloe led them to a large, open-plan office space where rows of employees sat at minimalist desks. The air, which had been so perfectly controlled a moment before, now felt noticeably warmer. A few employees fanned themselves with papers, and a low murmur of discontent began to spread. Suddenly, a loud, piercing alarm blared through the building, a frantic, mechanical shriek that cut through the calm with the force of a physical blow. The lights flickered and dimmed, then settled into a sickly yellow glow. The climate control system, a complex network of air vents and cooling units that maintained the building's perfect temperature, began to groan and whir, a sound of immense, impending failure. A new, more urgent alarm blared, this one indicating a major system failure. Chaos erupted. Employees, previously so calm and composed, sprang from their desks. They started yelling questions at one another and running toward the nearest exits, their faces a mixture of confusion and panic. The perfect, sterile facade of Innovate shattered in an instant. The air grew thick with a rising heat, the smell of ozone and burnt wiring filling the halls. The sleek, automatic doors hissed and locked, the security system kicking in to contain the issue, trapping them inside. The students, who had been so full of awe, were now huddled together, their eyes wide with fear. A few started crying. Chloe, the polished tour guide, was no longer a beacon of corporate professionalism. Her face was pale, her hands shaking as she fumbled with a tablet, a panicked look in her eyes. "There's been a critical systems failure," she stammered into a headset. "I don't know, the schematics aren't loading. The temperature is rising too fast. We can't unlock the doors." Just then, two senior engineers, a man and a woman, rushed into the office, their faces grim. "The main HVAC server is offline," the woman yelled. "We're losing temperature control throughout the entire complex. We have to override the security protocols before the equipment overheats and we lose power completely." The man, a portly, sweaty figure with a nervous tic, looked at the schematics on his tablet, his eyes scanning the impossible jumble of information. "It's not a software problem," he said, his voice laced with frustration. "The override command isn't responding. It's a physical malfunction. There's a feedback loop, something's preventing the physical failsafe from engaging. We can't fix this without a full diagnostic and we're out of time. We need to manually override the system, but the schematic is too complex." The students were now in full panic. A small group of them, including Marcus, were banging on the locked glass doors, their frantic cries echoing in the hot, stagnant air. Amid the rising chaos, Delhi's mind was a sudden island of calm. He wasn't focused on the panic or the heat, he was focused on the problem. He looked at the frantic engineers, their faces a mask of defeat, and then he thought about the faint whine he had heard earlier. He put two and two together in an instant. "It's the pressure manifold," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "In the main air handling unit. The valve is stuck, probably from a buildup of dust. It's creating a back pressure that's tripping the whole system. You have to reset the pneumatic regulator on the 3rd floor, near the main server room." Everyone stopped. All eyes turned to him. The senior engineers looked at him, then at each other, a bewildered, condescending look on their faces. Chloe snorted a small, disbelieving laugh. Marcus, seeing an opportunity to regain some social ground, pointed a finger at him and laughed loudly. "Oh, listen to him. Our little genius thinks he's a real engineer. What are you going to do, fix it with duct tape and shoeboxes?" he jeered. Deli looked directly at the senior engineer, his voice unwavering. "I can fix it," he said. "The schematics are too complex because they're designed to be, but the system itself is simple. The problem is a physical feedback loop. I can stop it. Let me go." The engineer scoffed. "Son, we appreciate your enthusiasm, but this is a complex system. We have highly trained professionals working on this. We don't have time for games." Deli stood his ground, his eyes fixed on the man. "You're out of time," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "I'm not a professional, but I know how this works. And if you don't let me try, you're going to lose a lot more than just your air conditioning." The senior engineer, a man named Mr. Thompson, scoffed, a bead of sweat tracing a line down his temple. "Kid, this isn't a science fair. This is a multi-million-dollar corporation. You don't just walk in and start guessing." His female colleague, Dr. Chin, looked at her tablet, her fingers flying across the screen with a frantic energy. "He's right," she muttered, "we're out of options. The software override is useless, and the physical schematics are designed to be impenetrable to unauthorized personnel. We can't get in to fix it manually." The temperature in the room was now oppressive. Employees were taking off their blazers and fanning themselves. One man was gasping for air, clutching his chest. The panic was no longer a low murmur, it was a rising wave of fear. The emergency lights cast a sickly, anxious glow on the faces around them. Deli saw the defeat in their eyes, the complete and utter surrender to a problem they believed was too big for them. He wasn't guessing. He had an innate, almost instinctive understanding of how things worked. He wasn't looking at a company, he was looking at a broken machine. He knew the faint high-pitched whine he had heard earlier was the sound of a pressurized system fighting a stuck valve. It was a simple, elegant problem with a simple, elegant solution. "The schematics are a distraction," Deli said, his voice cutting through the noise. "You're looking for a digital answer to a physical problem. The feedback loop is a pressure buildup. It's what's locking the system down. It's not a software glitch, it's a mechanical jam. If we release the pressure, the system will reset." He looked directly at Dr. Chen. "The pneumatic regulator is the key. You have a failsafe for a reason. It's designed to be simple, but you've been trained to look for complexity." Dr. Chen paused, her eyes widening slightly. Her colleague, Mr. Thompson, looked at her with incredulity. "Dr. Chen, you're not seriously considering this?" She ignored him. Her face, previously a mask of frustration, was now a portrait of desperate consideration. She looked at the panicked faces of her colleagues, at the rising temperatures. The portly man with the nervous tic was turning a blotchy red. They were running out of time. "Where?" she asked, her voice a low, urgent whisper. "3rd floor. The main server room," Deli said without hesitation. "There's a small, cylindrical panel near the emergency exit. It's on the right. You'll have to pop it off. The regulator is a red lever." Dr. Chen looked at her tablet again, this time with a new sense of purpose. She tapped a few keys, bypassing the schematics and bringing up the building's security layout. The floor plan came into view, a complicated network of corridors and rooms. She found the server room, and with a few more taps, the emergency exit Deli mentioned. The panel he described was, in fact, there. It was a manual override port, a physical entry point for emergencies. No one had even considered it because their minds were locked in the digital realm. "He's right," Dr. Chin said, her voice filled with a stunned disbelief. "He's absolutely right. He saw the failsafe. A physical one, not a software one." She looked at Mr. Thompson, who was now speechless. "I'm taking him." Deli and Dr. Chin began to move. They had to fight their way through a sea of panicked employees. People were screaming and some were even trying to break through the locked doors. Delhi, with Dr. Chin guiding him, moved with a single-minded focus, ignoring the chaos. The heat was now intense, a smothering blanket of humid air that made every breath a struggle. They reached a stairwell, the only way up now that the elevators were shut down, and began to ascend 2 steps at a time. Dr. Chin was a seasoned professional, but Delhi's athleticism, honed from years of running, gave him a small but noticeable lead. When they reached the 3rd floor, Delhi immediately spotted the cylindrical panel on the wall near the emergency exit. He moved towards it without hesitation. The panel was held in place by 2 small, tight bolts. Dr. Chin fumbled for a screwdriver. "I don't have one," she said, her voice a strained gasp. Delhi looked at her, his mind already working. He looked at the floor, at the wall, at the discarded soda can nearby. He picked up the can, tore a piece from it, and fashioned a makeshift tool. He shoved the sharp, metallic end into the bolt and twisted, the soft metal of the can groaning under the pressure. The bolt gave a pop and came loose. He did the same for the second one, his hands now scraped and bleeding. He pulled the panel off, revealing a series of wires and pipes. Dr. Chen's eyes were wide with awe. "How did you?" "No time," Delhi said. He reached into the cramped space and found the pneumatic regulator, a small, vibrant red lever that was completely out of place in the monochromatic world of metal and wires. He yanked it. There was a loud, shuddering clunk, followed by a hiss of released pressure. The entire building seemed to take a collective, mechanical sigh of relief. A moment later, the blaring alarms went silent. The emergency lights went off, and the normal, bright white LEDs hummed to life. The temperature in the air slowly began to drop, replaced by a refreshing, cool draft. Dr. Chen's tablet chimed, a new notification appearing on the screen. "System reset complete. All failsafes are online. Security doors are unlocked." Downstairs, the chaos turned into a collective sigh of relief. The employees, previously a frantic mob, were now looking at each other in a mixture of confusion and gratitude. They walked towards the doors, which hissed open to a welcome flood of cool, clean air. When Delhi and Dr. Chin returned to the main office, all eyes turned to them. The students, their fear replaced by a bewildered awe, looked at Delhi as if he were a ghost who had suddenly taken form. Marcus was standing in the back, his face a perfect picture of speechless, humiliated rage. Mr. Thompson, the senior engineer who had so readily dismissed him, now stood before him, his shoulders slumped, his face pale with a mixture of shame and amazement. "How did you know?" Mr. Thompson asked, his voice a low, incredulous whisper. "We've been working on this system for a decade. We built it. How did you, a kid we were told to dismiss, know more about it than we did?" Delhi looked at the man, at the students, at the chaos he had just unmade with his 2 hands and his brilliant mind. He didn't have a flashy answer. He just had the truth. "You looked for a digital problem," he said. "I looked for a simple one." The system was crying out, but no one was listening. The air was still, heavy with a new kind of silence. The chaos had given way to a stunned, collective calm. The employees, now fanning themselves with a restored sense of relief, looked at Delhi with a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. The students, previously so loud and boisterous, were quiet, their faces pale with shock. Delhi stood in the center of the large office, a solitary figure with scraped hands and a weary triumph in his eyes. Mr. Thompson, the senior engineer who had so readily dismissed him, was the first to speak. He didn't meet Delhi's gaze. He looked at his own shoes, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I don't understand," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. "We built the system to be foolproof. We spent months on the schematics, the protocols, the security loops. It was supposed to be perfect." Dr. Chin, however, looked at Delhi, her eyes filled with a respectful awe. "It was perfect," she said, her voice a soft, low hum. "The system was perfect, but so was he. He saw the one thing we were all trained to ignore. The simple, physical solution. We were looking at a billion-dollar machine and he was looking at a broken piece of junk. He saw it for what it was, not what we told him it was." She put a hand on his shoulder, a simple gesture of respect and admiration. Marcus, meanwhile, was in a perfect state of frozen, impotent rage. His face was a thundercloud of humiliation. His friends, previously his loyal chorus, were now whispering among themselves, their glances darting from the defeated Marcus to the triumphant Delhi. Kofi, on the other hand, walked up to Deli and, with a silent, meaningful nod, gave him a high five. "I knew it, man," he said, a grin spreading across his face. "I knew you had it in you." Just as Deli was about to respond, a new, imposing figure entered the room. He was a tall, silver-haired man in an impeccably tailored suit, his face a mask of stern authority. This was Mr. Sterling, the head of engineering and one of the company's founders. He was followed by a nervous-looking aide who was clutching a tablet. The room fell into an even deeper silence. "What happened here?" Mr. Sterling's voice was a low, commanding rumble. His gaze swept over the room, taking in the relieved employees, the terrified students, and the pale faces of his senior engineers. "Sir, there was a systems failure. The main HVAC server went offline and we lost climate control," Mr. Thompson stammered. "We were working on a solution but, well, we were running out of time." Mr. Sterling's gaze fell on Deli. He looked at the boy's scraped hands and his triumphant, albeit tired, expression. "And who is this?" he asked, his voice sharp and direct. Before anyone could answer, Dr. Chen stepped forward. "This is Deli, Mr. Sterling. He's a student from the middle school tour. He saved us." Mr. Sterling's expression didn't change. "Saved us? What do you mean?" Deli, finding a new kind of courage, stepped forward. "Sir, your system wasn't broken," he said, his voice surprisingly calm. "The physical failsafe was tripped. A pneumatic regulator in the main air handling unit got stuck. It was a simple problem, but your engineers were looking for a complex one. They were trying to fix a physical problem with software." Mr. Sterling's gaze softened slightly. He looked at Dr. Chen, who nodded. "He's right, sir. He diagnosed the problem just by listening to the system. He told us exactly where to go. We couldn't see it, but he did." Mr. Sterling looked at Deli for a long, silent moment. He wasn't looking at the clothes, the race, or the age. He was looking at a mind, a rare and beautiful thing. "Tell me your full name, son," he said. "Deli," he said. "Deli Adebayo." Mr. Sterling nodded slowly. He turned to his aide. "Find his school. Find out everything. We'll be in touch. And cancel the rest of the tour. Dr. Chen, I want you to give this young man a private, personal tour of the R&D labs. Show him everything. The real everything." The other students were stunned into silence. Marcus's face was a study in pure, unadulterated shock. The man he had mocked, the boy he had dismissed as a fluke, was now being personally escorted by a company founder. Deli's quiet genius had been noticed by the highest-ranking official in the company. Later that day, Deli and Kofi were back on the bus, the rest of the students still in a state of bewildered silence. The tour was over, but for Deli, a new door had just opened. He was no longer just the kid who had won a competition. He was a person of interest, a new kind of asset. He was no longer a ghost in the halls. He was a living, breathing testament to the power of a single brilliant mind. He had been given a golden key, a key to a world where his potential was limitless. He had saved a company, but in doing so, he had also found his own purpose, his own direction. The chaos of the day was over, but the quiet of the night would be filled with the sound of a new kind of hum, the hum of endless possibilities. He had come to Innovate to be inspired, but he was leaving as an inspiration himself. He had a new problem to solve, a new question to answer. What did Mr. Sterling want from him? And what did he want from this new world that was suddenly within his reach? The tour bus rumbled to life, its engine a low vibration against the pristine asphalt. The other students, still reeling from the events, watched as Deli and Dr. Chen walked away from the main group. The silence among them was a new kind of respect, a recognition of a power they couldn't comprehend. As Deli followed Dr. Chen back into the building, the air felt different. The sterile, corporate calm of the morning had been replaced by a quiet, purposeful energy. She led him down a different corridor, one that was less polished, its walls lined with exposed conduits and humming electrical boxes. This was the back end of Innovate, the raw, unfiltered heart of the company. Dr. Chen's face, which had been a mask of panic just an hour earlier, was now relaxed. She looked at Deli not with the condescending pity of an adult, but with the genuine, focused curiosity of a fellow engineer. "The tour they gave you was a show," she said, her voice low and confidential. "It's what we want the world to see, a perfect, seamless machine. But the truth is, nothing is perfect. The real work is messy and unpredictable. It's about listening for the problem no one else can hear. She stopped at a heavy, unmarked door and keyed in a long, complex code. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing a space that was a stark contrast to the gleaming halls they had just left. This was the R&D lab. Wires snaked across the floor, prototypes of new machines were covered in canvas tarps, and holographic displays flickered with half-formed designs. The air was thick with the scent of solder and ozone, a smell Deli found strangely comforting. "This is where we listen," Dr. Chin said, her eyes sweeping over the lab with an almost reverent affection. "We have millions of lines of code, billions of dollars of equipment. And still, a single jammed valve can bring it all down. We get so focused on the digital that we forget about the physical world. We forget the simple truth that a machine is only as good as its weakest link." "You didn't forget. You heard it." Deli walked through the lab, his eyes wide with wonder. He saw things he had only read about in science journals. A quantum computer in a cryogenic chamber, a prototype of a fusion reactor, and a series of complex robotic arms. He was not just a tourist anymore, he was a potential collaborator. Dr. Chin explained the basics of each project, but she didn't just talk, she listened. She asked him questions about what he saw, what he thought could be improved. She saw not a child but a mind on her level. Their private tour ended in a large, glass-walled office at the top of the building, a space that overlooked the entire Innovate campus. Mr. Sterling was waiting for them, a quiet, contemplative expression on his face. He gestured for Deli to sit, his gaze intense but not intimidating. "Deli," Mr. Sterling began, his voice a low, thoughtful murmur. "We spend millions on talent acquisition. We send scouts to the best universities, we pore over resumes and we search for the next generation of genius. But in all that searching we almost missed a real one. A true one. You didn't just see a problem today, you saw a weakness in our entire philosophy." He paused, a faint smile playing on his lips. "What you have is not just knowledge. It's an intuition. A sixth sense for how things work. That is an extremely rare gift. We want to nurture it. We want to give it room to grow." He then leaned forward, his voice a low, commanding whisper. "I'm not offering you an internship, Deli. I'm offering you a direct mentorship. I want you to have unlimited access to our resources, our labs, and our engineers. I want you to come here on weekends in the summers whenever you want. We will fund your education whatever path you choose, wherever you want to go. The only condition is that you keep listening. You keep telling us what we are missing. You keep seeing the simple truth that we have forgotten." Deli was speechless. The offer was monumental. It wasn't a prize, it was a promise. It was an escape from the world of Marcus's mockery and the teacher's dismissive smiles. It was a golden ticket to a future he couldn't have even dared to dream of. He looked at Mr. Sterling, at Dr. Chin, and then at his own scraped hands. He hadn't just fixed a machine. He had changed his own life. On the bus ride back, Deli didn't sit with Kofi. He sat alone in the same seat as before, but the world was no longer a dull hum. It was a symphony of possibilities. He looked out the window at the passing world, at the familiar sights of his neighborhood. He knew he was going home to the same life he had left that morning, but he also knew that he was returning as a different person. He had a secret now, a purpose that was bigger than himself. He had promised to keep listening. And for the first time in his life he felt like someone was finally listening to him, too. The final chapter of his old life was closing, and the first chapter of his new life was about to begin. The bus ride home was a quiet, contemplative affair. The usual post-tour chatter was absent, replaced by a stunned, respectful silence. The other students who had spent the last 3 days mocking Deli now looked at him with a mix of awe, confusion, and a hint of fear. He sat alone in his seat, his gaze fixed on the passing scenery, the city lights beginning to flicker to life as the sun dipped below the horizon. The weight of Mr. Sterling's offer pressed on him, a blueprint for a future he had never dared to imagine. It was more than an opportunity, it was a validation, a thunderous confirmation that his unique way of seeing the world wasn't a flaw, but a gift. When the bus pulled into the school parking lot, the students spilled out, a quiet, orderly stream. The teachers were waiting, their faces a complex study in astonishment. Mr. Jones, his usual patronizing smile gone, looked at Deli with an expression that was both apologetic and utterly bewildered. He struggled to reconcile the Deli he had dismissed as a disruptive oddity with the boy who had just saved a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Deli's parents were also there, their faces a mix of anxiety and overwhelming pride. They had always believed in their son, but this was something beyond their wildest expectations. As he walked towards his parents, Mr. Jones stepped forward. "Deli," he began, his voice a strained whisper. "The people from Innovate called. They said you did something remarkable." He looked at the boy's scraped hands and the tired, composed expression on his face. "We had no idea." Deli met his gaze. He didn't feel vindicated. He didn't feel the need to rub his triumph in the face of the man who had doubted him. He just felt understood. "I just listened," he said simply. "I heard the problem they couldn't." The statement wasn't a boast, it was just a simple, unadorned truth. His parents embraced him, their love a warm, comforting blanket. They didn't ask for details, not yet. They just held him, their pride evident in every touch. They had raised a son who saw the world differently, and that difference had just changed his life forever. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The phone calls from Innovate were frequent and direct. Mr. Sterling himself called to confirm the offer, and a few days later, a long, official-looking document arrived in the mail. It was a formal agreement detailing the terms of the mentorship: unlimited access to the R&D labs, a full scholarship to any university, and a small but significant stipend. It was all a bit surreal. He was just a kid, and yet here was a world-class corporation treating him like an equal. The biggest challenge wasn't the technology, it was the social shift. His classmates, once his tormentors, now gave him a wide berth, their respect a silent, awkward tribute. Marcus, in particular, was nowhere to be seen. The boy who had built his social standing on the back of Deli's humiliation was now an invisible ghost in the school halls. Deli, however, didn't gloat. He had learned that true power wasn't in putting others down, but in lifting up a world that had forgotten how to listen. A month later, on a crisp Saturday morning, Deli's parents drove him back to the Innovate campus. This time there was no bus, no tour group. He was a visitor but not a tourist. He was a student but not an intern. He was a protege, a future innovator. They were met by Dr. Chin, who greeted them with a genuine, warm smile. She led them through the same gleaming halls from the tour, but this time she pointed out the flaws, the messy parts, the human errors that she and Mr. Sterling had come to appreciate. She led them to the same R&D lab, the one he had seen in the midst of chaos. The space was still filled with prototypes and wires, but this time it felt like home. Mr. Sterling was waiting for them in his glass-walled office. He shook Deli's hand, a firm, confident grip. "Deli," he said, "welcome. The blueprint of tomorrow begins with a single idea, a single mind that can see what everyone else has missed. Today we begin building that future together." Deli's parents watched as their son, once a solitary figure on the sidelines, was given a seat at a table of visionaries. They saw the man who had mocked him and the woman who had trusted him now looking at their son with a quiet, profound admiration. They had seen his brilliance long before anyone else had, and now the world was finally catching up. The final scene of the story wasn't a triumphant cheer or a dramatic monologue. It was Deli sitting at a desk in the R&D lab, a holographic screen in front of him. He was no longer a student but a collaborator working on a new project. Dr. Chin stood beside him, watching him with a respectful silence. He wasn't just looking at schematics, he was listening to the silent hum of the machines around him, a language only he could understand. He looked out the window at the vast, sprawling campus and then in the distance at the familiar outline of his old middle school. It looked so small, so insignificant, a world he had outgrown. The problems he had faced there, the mockery, the prejudice, the loneliness, felt like a lifetime ago. He had come here to be inspired, and in the process he had become an inspiration himself. His life had changed, not because of a competition, but because he had the courage to say that a problem everyone saw as complex was simply a jam, a simple truth in a world that had lost its way. His quiet brilliance had not only saved a company, but had also unlocked a future, a new horizon for a boy who had always been told to stay in his place. Dear viewer, if you've watched up to this point, thank you for your support. I have a small request. If you enjoy my stories, you can subscribe to the channel, and don't hesitate to share your thoughts about the stories in the comments. Enjoy watching. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video.